There is a silent question that lives inside every human heart. Why do some relationships feel like peace, while others feel like war? Why do some people walk beside us and we grow, while others walk beside us and we slowly disappear? The answer is not hidden in the other person. The answer is hidden in how we show up, how we love, and how we understand ourselves before we try to understand someone else. A healthy romantic relationship is not something you find. It is something you build, breath by breath, moment by moment. It is a discipline, it is awareness, it is presence, and most importantly, it is honesty with yourself. Okay, you see, many people enter love with expectations, but very few enter with understanding. They want to receive, but they have not learned how to give. They want peace, but they carry chaos within. And then they wonder why love becomes heavy. Listen carefully, because this is where transformation begins. And first, know yourself before you try to know another. Second, do not seek completeness in someone else. Become complete within yourself. Third, communicate with clarity, not with emotion that blinds truth. And fourth, learn to listen, not to reply, but to truly understand. And fifth, respect space, because love grows where there is freedom. Sixth, let go of control, because love is not possession. Okay. Seventh, choose growth over comfort again and again. These are not just ideas. These are practices. And if you embody them, your relationship will not become perfect, but it will become real. And real is far more powerful than perfect. When you stop chasing validation, you begin to offer presence. When you stop fearing loss, you begin to appreciate what is here. And when you stop trying to change the other person, you begin to inspire change through your own being. Understand this deeply. Love is not about holding on tightly. It is about holding on consciously. It is about two individuals walking their own paths, yet choosing each other every single day. Before you can truly meet another person in love, you must first learn how to meet yourself in truth. Not the version of yourself that you show to the world. Not the version that tries to impress, to be accepted, to be chosen. But the raw, quiet, sometimes uncomfortable version that exists when everything outside becomes silent. Many people think they are ready for love because they feel emotion, because they feel attraction, because they feel loneliness. But emotion is not understanding. Emotion is only movement. It comes and goes like wind. And if you build a relationship only on emotion, you are building on something that never stays still. To know yourself means to sit with yourself without escaping. It means to observe your thoughts without becoming them. It means to feel your emotions without being controlled by them. When you are happy, you notice happiness. When you are angry, you notice anger. When you are afraid, you notice fear. But you do not become lost inside them. This is where real strength begins. Not in control over others, but in awareness of self. Heng. Because when you do not know yourself, you will always try to use another person as a mirror to define you. You will seek validation in their words. You will seek security in their presence. You will seek identity in their attention. And slowly, without noticing, you will place the responsibility of your inner world into their hands. And no human being is capable of carrying that responsibility forever. This is why many relationships become heavy. Not because love is missing, but because self-understanding is missing. You ask another person to complete what you have not yet explored within yourself. You ask them to heal what you have not yet faced. You ask them to give you peace that you have not yet cultivated internally. But love cannot be a replacement for self-awareness. Love can only expand what already exists inside you. So you must begin with observation. Watch how you react when you feel ignored. Watch how your mind behaves when you feel insecure. Watch how quickly you want to defend yourself when you feel challenged. These moments are not problems. They are teachers. Every reaction is a doorway into understanding yourself more deeply. And when you are alone, do not rush to fill the silence. Sit in it. Notice what arises. Sometimes restlessness will appear. Sometimes memories will surface. Sometimes discomfort will rise without reason. Do not escape it. Stay with it. Because in that staying, you begin to see who you are beneath distraction. And when you start seeing clearly, something shifts. You stop needing constant validation. You stop overreacting to small things. You stop expecting others to behave in a way that protects your fragile sense of identity. You begin to stand more stable within yourself. This stability is not coldness, it is clarity. And from this clarity, you enter relationships differently. You no longer enter to be saved. You enter to share, because clarity does not attack, it does not accuse, it does not manipulate. Clarity simply reveals. And what is revealed can be understood, even if it is uncomfortable. This is where emotional maturity begins to grow in a relationship. Not when everything is always smooth, but when both people learn to speak honestly without harming each other. When both people learn to receive truth without becoming defensive. When both people value understanding more than ego. And over time, communication becomes less about fixing problems and more about deepening connection. You begin to feel safe expressing yourself, and your partner begins to feel safe expressing themselves. There is no fear of being misunderstood because there is a shared commitment to clarity. You must remember that words are not just sounds. They are carriers of energy. They can either build trust or break it. They can either create closeness or distance. And the difference is not in vocabulary, but in awareness. When you communicate with clarity, you are not just speaking. You are respecting the space between two hearts. You are honoring truth without distortion. And you are allowing love to remain clean without confusion. This is how understanding grows between two people walking together. Listening is one of the most misunderstood aspects of love. Most people believe they are listening, but in truth, they are only waiting for their turn to speak, waiting to defend themselves, waiting to correct the other person. And in that waiting, the real essence of the other person is never truly received. And to listen, not to reply, but to understand, is a very different state of awareness. It is not a technique. It is a shift in presence. It requires you to step out of your own inner dialogue for a moment and fully enter the world of another human being without resistance. And when your partner speaks, they are not only sharing words, they are sharing emotions, experiences, fears, hopes, and sometimes even things they cannot fully express. But if your mind is busy preparing your response, you miss the depth of what is being offered to you. True listening begins when you stop trying to control the direction of the conversation, when you are not thinking about how to prove your point or how to protect your image. Instead, you simply stay with the other person's expression as it is, without adding your interpretation too quickly. In relationships, many conflicts are not because people do not speak, but because they are not heard. And not being heard creates distance. It creates frustration. It creates emotional isolation, even when two people are physically together. To truly listen is to allow space for the other person to unfold without interruption, space for their emotions to exist without being corrected immediately, space for their truth to be expressed, even if it is uncomfortable for you. This kind of listening requires patience, because sometimes what you hear may challenge your perspective. Sometimes it may trigger your ego. Sometimes it may bring discomfort. But if you remain present instead of reactive, something deeper begins to happen. Understanding begins to form beyond words. You can't. When you listen only to reply, you are still centered in yourself. The conversation becomes a reflection of your need to be right. But when you listen to understand, you temporarily dissolve your ego. You are no longer two separate voices competing. You become a space where truth can be shared safely. And in that space, something very powerful emerges. Trust. Connect. Because when a person feels truly heard, they begin to soften. They no longer feel the need to repeat themselves. They no longer feel the need to raise their voice to be understood. They begin to open more honestly, more deeply, more naturally. Listening is not passive. It is deeply active presence. It is the discipline of holding tension without interruption. It is the ability to stay with discomfort without escaping into judgment or reaction. Many relationships suffer because people listen through filters of past experiences, filters of fear, filters of assumptions. So instead of hearing what is actually being said, they hear what they expect to hear. And this distortion creates unnecessary conflict. When you learn to listen deeply, you begin to notice something important. Most people are not trying to attack you. They are trying to express themselves. Even in anger, there is often a hidden need for understanding, for care, for acknowledgement. But if you respond too quickly, you miss that deeper layer. And then communication remains only at the surface level, where words clash but hearts remain distant. True listening requires humility. It requires you to accept that you do not already know everything about the other person's experience. Even if you have known them for years, even if you think you understand them, every moment is new. Every emotion is fresh. Every expression deserves presence, not assumption. When you listen deeply, you are not losing yourself. You are expanding yourself, because you are allowing another reality to exist fully within your awareness without resistance. And this creates intimacy. Not the superficial kind based on words and attraction, but the deeper kind built on understanding and presence. The kind where both people feel safe to be real, not perfect. In such listening, silence becomes meaningful. A pause becomes respectful. Eye contact becomes understanding. You are not rushing the conversation. You are allowing it to breathe. Over time, this way of listening transforms the entire relationship. Misunderstandings reduce naturally. Emotional distance decreases, and connection becomes more stable, not because problems disappear, but because both people feel genuinely heard. And when a person feels heard, they feel valued. And when they feel valued, love begins to grow in a more grounded and peaceful way. This is the quiet strength of listening with understanding. To listen, not to reply, but to truly understand, is one of the deepest forms of love, and also one of the rarest. Most people enter a conversation already carrying their next sentence in their mind. They are not fully present with what is being said, because part of their awareness is already focused on defense, explanation, or correction. In this state, listening becomes incomplete. The words are heard, but the meaning behind the words is missed. Real listening begins when you stop preparing your answer, when you allow the other person's voice to exist without interruption inside your awareness. It is a quiet discipline, not of silence alone, but of inner silence. Because even if your mouth is not speaking, your mind can still be loud. And that inner noise prevents true understanding. In relationships, this difference is everything. Many arguments do not come from what is said, but from what is not truly heard. One person speaks with emotion, and the other responds with logic. One speaks with vulnerability, and the other responds with defense. And slowly, both begin to feel unseen, not because love is absent, but because presence is absent. To listen for understanding means you are not trying to win the conversation. You are not trying to prove that your perspective is more correct. You are simply allowing truth to be revealed, even if it is uncomfortable, even if it challenges your assumptions, even if it asks you to pause your own inner certainty. This kind of listening requires maturity, because it asks you to hold back reaction. It asks you to stay with discomfort without escaping into judgment. It asks you to remain open when your ego wants to close. And in that openness, something very subtle begins to change in you. You start to see the other person not as an opponent in a discussion, but as a human being expressing their inner world. And when someone feels that they are being truly heard, something softens inside them. Their need to defend reduces. Their intensity decreases. Their words begin to flow more honestly. Because deep inside every human being is a desire to be understood, not just responded to. But when a person feels interrupted or misunderstood, they naturally raise their voice or repeat themselves or withdraw completely. Not because they want conflict, but because they feel invisible. And invisibility in a relationship slowly becomes emotional distance. True listening removes that invisibility. It tells the other person, without words, I am here with you. I am not preparing to fight you. I am not waiting to correct you. I am here to understand you. This presence changes everything. Even difficult conversations become softer when both people feel safe enough to express without being cut off by immediate reaction. There is space for emotion to unfold fully, without distortion. Listening deeply also means you are willing to be silent at the right moments. Not silence as avoidance, but silence as respect. Sometimes the most powerful response is not a sentence, but a pause that allows the meaning to settle. A pause that shows you are not rushing the other person's truth. And in that space of patience, something unexpected happens. You begin to hear not only words, but the feeling behind the words. You begin to notice what is not being said. You begin to sense the deeper message beneath the surface expression. This is where real understanding begins. Most misunderstandings happen because people respond too quickly. They hear a sentence and immediately attach their own interpretation to it. But interpretation is not always truth. It is often shaped by fear, memory, or assumption. When you slow down your listening, you reduce distortion. And when distortion reduces, clarity appears naturally. In this way, listening becomes a form of respect. Respect for the other person's inner experience, respect for the moment, respect for the connection you are sharing. And when respect is present, love feels safer, more stable, more grounded. Over time, this way of listening transforms the entire relationship. Communication becomes less reactive, conflicts become less destructive, and even disagreements become opportunities for deeper understanding instead of separation. Because when you truly listen, you are not just hearing words. You are meeting a human being where they are, without resistance, without interruption, without judgment. And in that meeting, connection becomes real. One of the deepest misunderstandings in love is the belief that closeness means constant togetherness. Many people think that if they love someone, they must always be near them, always know what they are doing, always have access to them. But this thinking slowly suffocates the very thing it tries to protect. Because love is not something that survives in pressure. Love survives in space. To respect space is to understand that every human being is a complete world within themselves. Even in a relationship, even in deep connection, each person still carries their own thoughts, their own silence, their own inner movement that does not always need to be shared. When you allow that space, you are not creating distance. You are creating breathing room for love to remain alive. Many relationships begin with intensity. There is constant communication, constant attention, constant emotional exchange. It feels like closeness. But over time, without space, this intensity turns into pressure. And pressure always leads to resistance. One person begins to feel overwhelmed. The other begins to feel anxious. And what once felt like love slowly starts to feel like obligation. And respecting space means you do not try to control the other person's presence. You do not demand their attention as proof of love. You do not measure connection by how frequently they are available. Instead, you trust that connection does not disappear when distance appears. This is a deeper form of trust. Not trust in words, but trust in bond. When two people truly connect at a deeper level, physical distance or silence does not destroy that connection. It simply gives it room to settle, to integrate, to breathe. A person who understands space does not panic in silence. They do not immediately assume something is wrong when the other person is not responding. They understand that life exists beyond the relationship as well. There are moments for togetherness and there are moments for individuality. Both are necessary. Okay? Because if you remove space, you remove individuality. And if you remove individuality, what remains is not love, but dependence. And dependence is fragile. It easily turns into fear. Fear of loss. Fear of abandonment. Fear of being replaced. And from that fear, control begins to grow. Control is often disguised as care. It appears as concern, as checking, as needing to know everything. But underneath, it is not love. It is insecurity. It is the inability to trust that love can exist without constant monitoring. Real love does not monitor. It observes with calmness. It allows freedom without suspicion. It gives space without punishment. And in that freedom, something beautiful happens. The connection becomes stronger, not weaker. Okay. When a person feels free in a relationship, they naturally return with more openness. They do not feel trapped. They do not feel judged. They do not feel the need to hide parts of themselves. Instead, they feel safe to be authentic. And authenticity is where real intimacy begins. Space also allows self-growth. When you are always together, you may begin to lose your individual direction. Your identity starts to merge completely into the relationship. But love is not meant to erase identity. Love is meant to support it. A healthy relationship is made of two individuals who continue to evolve. And evolution requires solitude. It requires moments of reflection. It requires time away from external influence. Without that, growth becomes limited. So when you respect space, you are not stepping away from love. You are honoring it at a deeper level. You are saying, I trust you enough to let you exist fully as yourself. I do not need to hold you tightly to feel connected to you. This kind of trust is rare because it goes against emotional insecurity. The mind often equates distance with loss, but awareness understands that distance is not absence. It is simply another form of presence that is not physical. In fact, space can make love more pure because when two people come back together after space, there is freshness, there is appreciation, there is clarity. You see each other again without the heaviness of constant consumption. You remember the value of the connection instead of taking it for granted. Without space, familiarity can turn into dullness. With space, familiarity is renewed again and again, and in this rhythm of togetherness and individuality, love becomes balanced. It is no longer a cage. It becomes a choice, a conscious choice made every time two people return to each other freely. Respecting space also teaches emotional maturity. It teaches you to sit with your own emotions instead of immediately projecting them onto the other person. It teaches you to remain stable even when the other is not constantly present. It builds inner strength. Because if love is real, it does not need constant proof. It does not need constant presence. It exists beyond movement. It exists in understanding. And when space is respected, relationships stop feeling like pressure and start feeling like flow. Nothing is forced. Nothing is clung to. Everything is allowed to breathe in its natural rhythm. And in that rhythm, love does not weaken, it deepens. This is where freedom and connection meet as one. Control is one of the most silent poisons in a relationship. It does not always appear as aggression or force. Sometimes it appears as care. Sometimes it appears as concern. Sometimes it even appears as love itself. But beneath all these appearances, control is still control. And where control exists, love cannot breathe freely. Okay. To let go of control is not an easy act because control often comes from fear. The fear of losing someone, the fear of being hurt, the fear of being replaced, the fear of not being enough. And when fear enters love, it begins to shape behavior in subtle ways. You start watching more. You start questioning more. You start holding tighter, thinking that if you hold tighter, you will keep them closer. But life does not respond to tightness. Life responds to openness. Like when you try to control another human being, you're trying to shape them into a version that feels safe, for your mind. You want certainty. You want predictability. You want assurance that nothing will go wrong. But love is not a fixed structure. Love is a living energy, and anything living cannot be controlled without being damaged. In the beginning, control may feel like stability. It may feel like you are protecting the relationship, but slowly it starts to create pressure. The other person begins to feel watched. They begin to feel restricted. They begin to feel that they cannot be fully themselves without being judged or corrected. And when a person cannot be themselves in love, they start to hide parts of themselves. Not because they are dishonest, but because they are trying to protect their freedom. And in that hiding, distance begins to grow silently. Letting go of control means trusting that love does not need constant interference to survive. It means understanding that a healthy relationship is not built on supervision, but on awareness. Not on ownership, but on respect. You must understand deeply, love is not possession. A person is not something you own. They are not an extension of your identity. They are a separate consciousness walking their own path. Even when paths are shared, individuality remains untouched. When you accept this truth, something softens inside you. You stop trying to manage every detail of the relationship. You stop trying to predict every outcome. You stop trying to prevent every possible loss. And instead, you begin to relate from presence rather than fear. Control always tries to secure the future, but love exists only in the present. The moment you release control, you begin to see your partner more clearly. Not as someone you need to shape, but as someone you need to understand. You begin to observe their nature instead of resisting it. You begin to listen instead of correcting. You begin to accept instead of forcing, and in this acceptance, connection becomes more natural. There is less tension, less resistance. There is more flow between two people who are no longer trying to dominate each other's experience. Control also comes from insecurity within oneself. When you are not stable inside, you try to stabilize your outer world. You try to make your partner behave in ways that reduce your inner anxiety. But no external control can permanently fix internal instability. Okay, real security in love does not come from controlling the other person. It comes from understanding yourself. When you are grounded within, you no longer need to control everything around you to feel safe. Letting go of control does not mean becoming careless. It does not mean ignoring your needs or tolerating harm. It means acting from awareness instead of fear. It means choosing communication over manipulation. It means choosing clarity over suspicion. Okay? There is a very subtle difference between guiding and controlling. Guidance comes from respect. Control comes from fear. Guidance allows freedom. Control limits it. Guidance creates understanding. Control creates pressure. Okay? When two people stop controlling each other, something beautiful begins to emerge. Trust becomes natural. Conversations become lighter. There is less need to explain every small action. There is more space for individuality to exist without threat, and in that space, love feels lighter. It feels more alive. It feels less like a responsibility and more like a shared experience. You begin to realize that you cannot hold someone by force, only by resonance. If your connection is real, it does not need chains. It does not need monitoring. It does not need constant proof. It simply exists, and both people choose it again and again. This is the deeper maturity of love. Not control, but understanding. Not possession, but presence. Not fear, but trust. And when control disappears, love finally becomes what it was always meant to be. Letting go of control is not something the mind agrees to easily, because the mind is built on fear of uncertainty. It wants guarantees. It wants outcomes it can predict. It wants to feel that nothing will go wrong if it keeps watching closely enough. But love does not grow in the space of control. It grows in the space of trust, and trust begins where control ends. Yet many people do not recognize how control slowly enters a relationship. It rarely arrives in an obvious form. It begins softly, as concern. You start asking more questions, not because something is wrong, but because you want to feel secure. You begin to check more, observe more, analyze more. At first, it feels like involvement. It feels like care. But underneath, there is a subtle fear that something might slip away if you are not paying attention. And slowly, this energy changes the atmosphere between two people. When you try to control someone you love, you are not actually loving them as they are. You are loving the version of them that feels safe inside your imagination. You begin to shape expectations around how they should speak, how they should respond, how they should behave, how they should prove their love to you. But a human being cannot live inside another person's expectations without losing themselves. And when someone starts losing themselves in a relationship, they do not always resist loudly. Sometimes they withdraw quietly. They become less open, less expressive, less present, not because love is gone, but because freedom is disappearing. Control creates a strange illusion. It makes you feel like you are holding the relationship together, but in reality, you are tightening it to the point where it cannot breathe. And anything that cannot breathe eventually becomes distant, even if it is still physically near you. To release control means to shift from fear-based love to awareness-based love. Fear says, I must manage this person so I do not lose them. Awareness says, I must understand this person and allow them to be so that connection remains real. This is a very different inner state. Fear is tense, awareness is calm, fear grasps, awareness observes, fear interferes. Awareness understands. When you stop controlling, you begin to see your partner more clearly, not through the filter of insecurity, but through the clarity of presence. You stop reacting to every small action as a threat or signal. You begin to give space for explanations to naturally arise instead of forcing conclusions. And something very important happens in this shift. You start to realize that love was never meant to function like ownership. A person is not a possession. They are not an object that becomes safer when tightly held. They are a living being with their own rhythm, their own inner world, their own silent process that continues even when you are not witnessing it. When you accept this truth, your grip naturally loosens. Letting go of control also means accepting unpredictability. It means understanding that you cannot protect yourself from every possible emotional discomfort. You cannot design a relationship where nothing ever triggers fear or uncertainty. Life does not work that way, and love certainly does not. But what you can develop is inner stability. When you are stable within yourself, you no longer need to control the outer world to feel safe. You stop making your partner responsible for your emotional balance. You begin to take ownership of your own inner state. This is where real maturity begins. Because then you stop saying, you must act this way so I feel okay. And instead you start saying, I will understand what I feel and communicate it with clarity. This small shift changes the entire quality of love. Without control, communication becomes more honest. Listening becomes more open. Space becomes more natural. There is less tension in everyday interactions because neither person feels constantly evaluated or restricted. And paradoxically, the more you release control, the more stable the relationship becomes. Not because you are holding it tighter, but because you are allowing it to exist in truth rather than pressure. In this freedom, trust grows. And where trust grows, love becomes effortless. Not forced, not managed. Just alive, present, and real. Comfort feels safe. Comfort feels familiar. Comfort feels like a place where nothing is challenged and nothing is lost. But if you look deeply, comfort is also the place where growth slowly stops. In relationships, many people confuse comfort with love and stability with growth. But love without growth becomes repetition, and repetition slowly becomes stagnation. To choose growth over comfort again and again is one of the most conscious decisions two people can make together. Because growth is not always gentle, Growth sometimes asks you to face yourself. It asks you to confront your habits, your reactions, your fears, your expectations. And most importantly, it asks you to change what feels easy. Comfort says stay the same, do not disturb what feels known. Growth says evolve, even if it feels uncertain. Comfort holds you in place. Growth moves you forward. And in love, if both people choose only comfort, the relationship may feel peaceful on the surface, but internally it slowly loses depth. At first, comfort in a relationship feels beautiful. There is no tension. There are no difficult conversations. Everything feels smooth. But if that smoothness comes from avoidance, then it is not peace. It is delay. Because unspoken truths do not disappear. Unresolved emotions do not dissolve on their own. They remain within, quietly shaping distance. Choosing growth means you are willing to have uncomfortable conversations when needed. You are willing to face emotional truths instead of escaping into silence. You are willing to understand patterns that keep repeating even when they feel inconvenient to address. This requires courage, because it is easier to stay comfortable than to stay honest. In many relationships, people avoid growth because they fear conflict. They think conflict will damage love. But in reality, it is not healthy conflict that damages love. It is unresolved silence. It is pretending everything is fine when it is not. It is avoiding truth to maintain temporary peace. Growth invites truth into the relationship, and truth, even when uncomfortable, creates real stability. Because now, nothing is hidden. Nothing is suppressed. Nothing is left to silently accumulate inside. Okay? To choose growth is also to accept that both individuals will change over time. You are not the same person you were before, and neither is your partner. If you resist natural, you begin to expect a fixed version of someone who is constantly becoming something new. And this mismatch creates frustration. But when both people choose growth, change becomes natural instead of threatening. You begin to support each other's evolution instead of resisting it. You begin to understand that love is not about staying the same together, but about growing together in awareness. Growth in a relationship also means taking responsibility for your own inner patterns. Instead of blaming the other person for every discomfort, you start asking what this situation is showing you about yourself. You begin to observe your triggers instead of reacting blindly to them. And in that observation, maturity begins to develop. Comfort avoids self-reflection. Growth requires it. There will be moments when choosing growth feels heavy. Moments when staying silent feels easier than speaking truth. Moments when accepting something feels easier than transforming it. But every time you choose awareness over avoidance, you strengthen the foundation of the relationship, and slowly something changes. The relationship becomes less about emotional dependency and more about conscious partnership. You are no longer together just to feel safe. You are together to evolve, to understand life more deeply through each other, to refine your awareness through shared experience. Comfort often not seeks repetition of what already feels good. Growth seeks expansion into what is still unknown. And love, in its deepest form, is not repetition. It is expansion. When two people commit to growth, they begin to challenge each other in healthy ways. Not to break each other, but to awaken each other. Not to criticize, but to refine. Not to control, but to inspire awareness. And this creates a dynamic relationship that continues to evolve rather than slowly becoming stagnant. Even disagreements begin to carry meaning in this space. Instead of becoming battles, they become opportunities to understand deeper layers of each other. Instead of creating distance, they create clarity, because both people are committed not to comfort, but to truth. And truth, even when uncomfortable, strengthens connection in a way comfort never can. Choosing growth also means accepting responsibility for change within yourself. You cannot expect your partner to evolve while you remain unchanged. Growth is never one-sided in a healthy relationship. It is mutual, or it becomes imbalance, so you begin to observe yourself more honestly. You begin to adjust where needed. You begin to release habits that no longer support connection, not because you are forced, but because you understand the value of evolution. Over time, this shared commitment creates a very different kind of love. A love that is not static. A love that is not dependent on ideal conditions. A love that is alive because both people are continuously becoming more aware, more honest, more present. And in this kind of relationship, even comfort feels different. It is no longer comfort born from avoidance. It is comfort born from understanding. It is a calmness that exists because nothing important is being ignored. This is the deeper path of love, not comfort that stops growth, but growth that deepens love. And now, as we come to the end of this understanding, take a moment to feel what has truly been shared here. A healthy romantic relationship is not built in a day, and it is not sustained by emotion alone. It is built through awareness, through presence, through honesty, and through the continuous choice to grow beyond fear, beyond control, and beyond illusion. When you begin to know yourself, you stop depending on others to define you. When you become complete within yourself, you stop searching for someone to fill your emptiness. When you communicate with clarity, you bring truth into connection. When you listen with understanding, you create space for real intimacy. When you respect space, you allow love to breathe. When you release control, you allow trust to rise. And when you choose growth over comfort, you keep love alive and evolving. This is not a destination. This is a way of living love consciously, moment by moment, breath by breath. There will still be challenges. There will still be emotions, misunderstandings, and change. But with awareness, nothing becomes destruction. Everything becomes understanding. So walk into your relationships with presence, not pressure, with clarity, not confusion, with trust, not fear, and with the courage to grow, even when it feels uncomfortable. May your love become a space of peace, truth, and inner expansion for both you and the one beside you. Good luck on your journey of love and awareness, and thank you for being present in this understanding. And you no longer enter to fill emptiness. You enter from fullness. You are no longer searching for someone to fix your inner world. You are simply allowing someone to walk beside you as you continue your own inner journey. To know yourself is also to understand your patterns. The way you love, the way you fear loss, the way you attach, the way you withdraw. These patterns are often old, shaped by experiences you may not even fully remember. But they repeat until you become conscious of them. Awareness breaks repetition. And when you see your patterns clearly, you gain a choice. You are no longer acting blindly. You are responding consciously. This is where maturity in love begins. Not in perfection, but in awareness. You begin to realize that not every feeling needs action. Not every thought is truth. Not every fear is reality. And in that realization, space is created. Space to breathe. Space to listen, space to truly meet another person without projecting your inner noise onto them. Okay? Because only when you are not lost within yourself can you truly see another. And in that seeing, love becomes something very different. It becomes simple, it becomes honest, it becomes present. Okay? This is why the first step is always inward. Before union, there must be understanding. Before connection, there must be awareness. Before you try to know another heart, you must first learn the landscape of your own. Only then can love become clear and grounded, not confusion, not dependency, but conscious presence shared between two whole beings. And this is where love begins. Okay? When you search for someone to complete you, you are already standing on a foundation of lack. And anything built on lack will always feel unstable, no matter how beautiful it looks from the outside. Many people enter relationships carrying an invisible belief that they're incomplete, that something is missing inside them, and that another person will finally bring that missing piece. But pause here and look deeply into this idea. If you are incomplete alone, how can another incomplete person make you complete? Two empty spaces do not create fullness. They only echo emptiness together. True wholeness is not something granted by love. It is something discovered within silence, within awareness, within self-understanding. When you begin to realize this, your entire approach to relationships begins to shift. To become complete within yourself does not mean you reject love or isolate yourself from connection. It means you stop depending on love to define your value. It means you stop asking another person to carry the weight of your identity. It means you stand on your own inner ground, steady and present, before you invite someone into your life. When you are not complete within yourself, you unconsciously place expectations on your partner that no human being can fulfill. You expect them to always understand you, to always comfort you, to always respond in the way you need. And when they inevitably fall short, because they are human, disappointment begins to grow. But when you are complete within yourself, expectation transforms into appreciation. You no longer demand perfection. You no longer measure every action against your insecurity. You begin to see your partner as they are, not as a solution to your inner gaps. Completeness is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole in your awareness. It is about accepting every part of yourself, even the parts you once tried to hide. Your fears, your doubts, your past wounds, your insecurities, you do not run from them anymore. You acknowledge them, you understand them, and slowly they lose control over you. Okay? When you are no longer fragmented inside, you stop seeking external fragments to fill you. Okay? A person who is complete within themselves enters a relationship differently. They do not cling. They do not chase. They do not fear silence, because silence is no longer empty for them. It is peaceful. They are not trying to extract happiness from another person. They are sharing the happiness that already exists within them. And this is where love begins to breathe freely, because now there is space. Space for individuality, space for difference, space for growth. Two complete individuals standing beside each other, not leaning on each other to survive, but choosing to walk together to evolve. And in such a space, love becomes lighter. There is no constant pressure to fix, to prove, to validate. There is only presence. There is only respect. There is only understanding. You must understand, dependence is not love. Dependence is fear wearing the mask of attachment. When you depend on someone for your emotional stability, you slowly lose your inner strength. You begin to adjust yourself not out of wisdom, but out of fear of losing them. And in that process, you start disappearing from your own life. Yeah? But when you are complete within yourself, you do not disappear. You remain rooted. You can love deeply without losing yourself. You can care deeply without losing direction. You can give without emptying yourself. And this is the paradox. The more complete you become alone, the more capable you become in love. Because now you are not seeking someone to rescue you from your inner emptiness. You are meeting someone from a place of fullness. You are not asking them to give you identity. You already have one. You are not asking them to create your happiness. You are already cultivating it within. Okay. This is why relationships between complete individuals feel different. They feel calm. They feel grounded. They feel expansive. There is no constant tension of need. There is instead a natural flow of giving and receiving, without fear, without possession. And even when conflict arises, because conflict always arises between two human beings, it does not become destruction. It becomes understanding. Because neither person is fighting to protect their fragile identity. They are simply learning to see each other more clearly. To become complete within yourself is not a destination. It is a continuous awareness. It is a daily return to yourself. A reminder that you are already enough in this moment, even as you grow, even as you evolve. And when you carry this understanding into love, something beautiful happens. Love stops being a search. It becomes a meeting. Two whole beings meeting in presence, choosing each other not out of need, but out of clarity and freedom. That is the deeper foundation of any healthy romantic relationship. Communication is often spoken about as if it is only about words, but in reality, communication is the movement of energy between two human beings. It is not just what you say, it is how you say it, why you say it, and what state you are in when you say it. In relationships, many misunderstandings are not born from wrong intentions, but from unclear expression and uncontrolled emotion. When emotion takes over, truth becomes distorted. You may say something in anger that you do not truly mean, or you may remain silent when something important needs to be expressed. In both cases, communication loses its clarity, and confusion begins to grow between two hearts that may actually care deeply for each other. To communicate with clarity means to first slow down within yourself before you speak. It means you do not allow your reaction to become your message. There is a moment, a very small but powerful space between feeling and expression. In that space lies wisdom. If you can remain aware in that space, your words will carry understanding instead of conflict. But most people skip this space. They speak immediately from emotion. They defend immediately. They accuse immediately. And then they wonder why their relationships feel unstable. The truth is simple. A relationship cannot survive long in an environment where words are constantly shaped by unprocessed emotion. The communication is not about winning a point. It is not about proving who is right or wrong. That kind of communication creates distance. It builds walls instead of bridges. Real communication is about creating understanding, even when there is disagreement. When you communicate with clarity, you are not trying to force the other person to accept your perspective. You are simply offering your truth without distortion. You are saying, this is what I feel, this is what I experience, this is what I need you to understand. And then you allow space for the other person to respond without pressure. This kind of communication requires inner stability, because if you are insecure, you will speak to control the outcome. If you are fearful, you will speak to avoid abandonment. If you are angry, you will speak to release pressure. But none of these states create clarity. They create reaction. Clarity comes from presence. When you are present, you are not speaking from past wounds or future fears. You are speaking from what is real in this moment. And what is real in this moment is always simpler than what the mind creates through overthinking. In relationships, many conflicts grow because people assume instead of asking. They interpret instead of listening. They project, and slowly layers of misunderstanding build up, not because love is missing, but because clarity is missing. When you learn to communicate clearly, you also learn to listen differently. You are no longer listening only to respond. You are listening to understand. And there is a deep difference between the two. Listening to respond is about preparing your defense. Listening to understand is about opening your awareness. In true communication, silence is also part of expression. Sometimes the most powerful response is to pause, to breathe, and to allow space for truth to settle. Not every moment requires immediate reaction. Some moments require reflection. When clarity enters communication, tension begins to dissolve.